Don't Waste Your Memorial Day by Nathan Branham. Voice acting by Dalton Malt. This is a Thistledown Press production. No part of this may be reproduced without the express written consent of the creators. Memorial Day. In the U.S., it's a time filled with backyard barbecues, kids playing in the yard till the sun goes down, friends and family, and some well-deserved R&R. But is it more than just those things? Yes, it is. The primary reason most of us will get to take this paid vacation day off is to honor the men and women who gave their lives while serving in the United States military. Those whom we remember and honor today laid their lives down for their families, friends, you, me, and this great nation. They demonstrate that freedom is anything but free. So, if one of your loved ones made the ultimate sacrifice defending our nation, we honor their heroism, and from the bottom of our collective heart, we thank you for your sacrifice. We remember them today. Born out of the Civil War, Memorial Day, then known as Decoration Day, was proclaimed on May 5, 1868, by General John Logan as
The 30th of May, 1868, is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land.
The date of Decoration Day, as it was called then, was chosen because it wasn't the anniversary of any particular battle. It wouldn't officially be declared a federal holiday until 1971. The United States of America is the greatest nation on the face of God's green earth. God has blessed us with freedoms, protections, and a system of government that is the envy of the nations. And may I also add, the light thereof. But it has come with a significant cost. In all of the wars that this nation has fought, both foreign and domestic, from the American Revolution to America's War on Terror, between the years of 1775 to the present, we've lost over 650,000 lives on the battlefield alone. That's excluding those who died outside of combat and the wounded. A heavy expense to pay indeed. But you and I are able to live in freedom because of it. We can worship freely. We can carve individual paths for the lives we choose to live, be it noble or otherwise. It's a sobering fact. The greatest loss of lives this nation has ever seen didn't come by the hands of the British or the Germans. It came by our very own hands. During the Civil War, we lost nearly 500,000 young men. And I think there's a lesson somewhere in that fact that we could learn from today. While we have the privilege of picking our political leaders and proclaiming our respective views, we must remain ever vigilant in our love for God, our fellow Americans, and the Judeo-Christian principles it was founded upon, so that we never again destroy ourselves in that manner. May we never let anyone divide us as a people, not partisan politics, not elected officials, not religious leaders, nor enemies foreign or domestic. The battles of our nation and its military span time and space. But consider a small sliver of time of what may rank near the top of examples of sacrifice that have come to us out of the wars we fought. World War II. It was a 6-year bloody battle with Germany and Japan and was our second deadliest war. 300,000 lives were spent defending our shores. Most of us are only faintly familiar with it because of a history class, or a visit to a war memorial. Or if you're like me, you remember that iconic picture from your high school history book of the flag raising that was taken on Mount Suribachi on February 23, 1945. So for just a few moments, we'll focus on the battle for Iwo Jima, Japan. I have a personal connection with Japan. I spent some time on the island of Okinawa as I served with 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. I was an 0351 infantry assaultman. And being as you couldn't fire heavy weapons on the island, such as tow missiles like I fired, or artillery, we had to train on the mainland. During that time, I got to climb Mount Fuji, Japan's highest peak. I literally ran up the mountain and back down again. I was in much better shape then. The trek down was the most fun, though. Mount Fuji is a dormant volcano, last erupting in 1707, so it's covered in thick black volcanic ash. It was so thick, in fact, that in places you could leap 10 to 15 feet down and have no fear of a hard landing. Like Mount Fuji, Iwo Jima was a volcanic pear-shaped island covered in thick black volcanic ash. Marine Captain Raymond Henry of the 5th Amphibious Corps said about Iwo Jima,
After God got through making the world, he must have took all the dirty ash and rubble left over and made Iwo Jima.
the reason this little volcanic cone of an island became a place of such hot contention was because of its strategic location. If the U.S. could wrangle it out of the death grip of the Japanese, it would serve as an airfield from which U.S. forces could reach mainland Japan, which at that point they didn't have. Anything worth having is worth sacrificing for, and sacrifice we would. For the Japanese, defending Iwo Jima was defending their homeland. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi turned Iwo Jima into a large fortress. It was a deadly labyrinth littered with pillboxes, machine gun nests, gun emplacements, dug-in tanks, and artillery command posts. His embattlements proved so effective that the 72-plus day and night U.S. air bombardment damaged them very little. The air raids prior to D-Day were intended to soften the island up and make it easier for the 70,000 Marines that would fight for it. It didn't work. Imagine with me, if you will. It's February 19th, 1945. There's a slight chill in the air. You're a young, 18 or 19-year-old fresh out of high school, wide-eyed young man, seemingly with your whole life ahead of you. You've just completed boot camp. You made it through infantry school. Heretofore, you've never been outside of your own state, let alone the country. But now here you are, in an unfamiliar and faraway land, steaming full speed ahead in an amphibious tractor toward a black ash beach. Diesel fumes, salt and bilge water, and the scent of ocean detritus hang heavy in the air. If you're lucky, you'll get killed quickly. If you're more lucky, you'll survive, but with injuries. When the tracks landed on the beach that morning, all remained calm besides the traffic jam of vehicles bogged down in the ash. The Japanese strategy was to let the force land, wait for their approach, and then strike from every hidden, covered, and dug-in hole from the hundreds of positions scattered all over the island. Once the Marines were ashore, they made their trek inland about 500 yards. At that point, the Japanese unleashed hell upon our men. To give you a small glimpse of the frightful fierceness of battle conditions, listen to what Marine Robert Sherrod said.
Whether the dead were Japs or American, they had one thing in common. They had died with the greatest possible violence.
One of those valiant men who paid with his blood was First Lieutenant Jack Loomis of the 27th Marines. In happier times, he was an All-American football player at Baylor. He was in front of his rifle platoon when he was knocked flat by a grenade. He rose and ran on, destroying a gun emplacement. The grenade shattered his shoulder. He rose again, charged, and killed every Japanese fighter. He called his men to follow. They began to advance, following his lead. Suddenly, Loomis disappeared in a violent explosion. And when the smoke cleared, his horrified men saw him, both legs blown off, standing on bloody stumps, shouting them on. Fight on! Fight on! Blinded by tears of rage, the Marines swept forward to overrun 300 yards of Japanese emplacements. The battle for Iwo raged for 36 days with little visible success, except for the capture of Mount Suribachi. For 3 days, the 28th Marines fought their way up the mount, destroying pillbox and bunker one by one. One Marine wrote about the battle.
There was nothing inspiring about taking Mount Suribachi. We felt only reluctance and enervating anxiety. There seemed nothing ahead but death. If we'd managed somehow to make it across the open area, we'd only become close-range targets for those concealed guns. I myself was seized by a sensation of utter hopelessness. I could feel the fear dragging at my jowls.
On the morning of February 23rd, First Lieutenant H.G. Schreier set out to seize the summit. All over the southern part of the island, men turned to watch their progress. They carried a flag, and when they reached the edge of the scooped-out crater at 10:15, 6 Marines planted the stars and stripes. The iconic photo taken by Joe Rosenthal of Sergeant Michael Strank, Corporal Harlan Block, Private First Class Frankie Susel, Corporals Renee Gagnon, Ira Hayes, and Harold Schultz provided the silent strength which helped sustain a nation that was weary and heartsick with war. Iwo Jima was finally captured on March 16, 1945. In the end, the Marines sustained nearly approximately 26,000 casualties, nearly 6,000 of which were battlefield deaths. Admiral Chester Nimitz captured the gallantry of Iwo Jima better than any other when he said, "Uncommon valor was a common virtue." It is that valor and sacrifice we remember today, but not just from Iwo Jima, but from every war we've fought and won as a nation. This is the land of the free because of the brave. The Christian faith is built upon sacred memory. The ordinance of communion is captured in the words of Jesus, saying, "This is my body which is broken for you. Do this in memory of me." This day of national observance should naturally conduct the mind of the believer back to the ultimate sacrifice that God made for humanity in the person of His Son, Jesus Christ, on the cross of Calvary. John 15:13 probably captures the spirit of this day better than any other. Jesus said, "Greater love has no man than this, than he lay down his life for his friends." And while the highest love of humanity is sacrificing for friends, God takes His love to the next level. Divine love dies for its enemies. Romans 5:8 describes this ultimate of sacrifices and the layers of love in which it was wrapped when it states, "But God demonstrates His own love toward us in that while we were His enemies, Christ died for us." What may be the most meaningful thing we do on this Memorial Day is determine what we'll do with the spiritual freedom purchased for us by Jesus. What will you do with the liberty bought by fighting men? Why don't you use that freedom to set others free with the good news of the kingdom of God? Jesus died for you so that you could live and sacrifice for others, yes, even your enemies, so that they might know Him and become the sons and daughters of the living God. To do anything else would be to waste their grand sacrifice and to waste your life. The following words from Pastor John Piper are the epitome of a wasted life. He said, and I quote, "I will tell you what a tragedy is. I will show you how to waste your life. Consider a story from the February 1998 edition of Reader's Digest. It tells about a couple who took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago when he was 59 and she was 51. Now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise on their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and collect shells. At first, when I read it, I thought it might be a joke, a spoof on the American dream, but it wasn't. Tragically, this was the dream. Come to the end of your life, your one and only precious God-given life, and the last great work of that life before you give an account to your Creator be this: playing softball and collecting shells. Picture them before Christ at the great day of judgment. Look, Lord, see my shells. That is a tragedy. And people today are spending billions of dollars to persuade you to embrace that tragic dream. Over against that, I put my protest. Don't buy it. Don't waste your life. In light of the tremendous sin debt paid by God on our behalf and the great cost our fellow Americans have paid for our freedom, I beg you in Christ's stead on this Memorial Day, don't waste it by self-absorbed living. Give your life for others, redeem your Memorial Day, and live a life worthy of being remembered.